Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be going over my top 5 video game autobiographies. This is going to be a little bit different from the list on my website, just because I've read more biographies at this point than I did back when I wrote that initial list. So we start off with Creating Qbert by Warren Davis. This is an awesome book. It was really great to read this. I didn't really know a whole lot about how Qbert was made, but reading this book, he was very detailed in what he did when he was making Qbert, how Qbert got made, and giving credit to all the people that helped him to make Qbert. He also talks quite a bit about the other games that he made, and I found a lot of the stuff with the full motion video games to be way more interesting than Qbert, just because it was more about the production of the games, collecting the footage, editing it together, and then kind of laying the game over top of it, or working the cutscenes into the actual gameplay. It was really cool to read that sort of thing. And then the book takes kind of a turn, and we start talking about Warren's acting career. That was amazing. I did not see that one coming at all, and it was probably the most interesting thing in this book was him talking about the improv classes he took, the different acting roles that he had, and his kind of debate on whether he wanted to keep pursuing game development or try to do acting. It was really cool to read that sort of thing. Overall, this is just an absolutely wonderful book, and it's definitely one of the ones that I would recommend to anybody looking for something to read. Walt Williams was someone that I didn't know too much about before I picked up this book, but I read a lot of the stuff that was kind of on the dust cover and thought, this sounds pretty interesting. He talks an awful lot about game development in here, how he got into the video game industry, and just the grueling process of making a video game. It was really entertaining and very interesting to read. He talks an awful lot about Spec Ops: The Line in here, since he was one of the lead writers and did a lot of creative work with the game, and just talking about the process of getting that game out. It was pretty interesting to read that sort of thing, and also interesting to read just all of the different stories that he has in here from his time in, just in the video game industry. It's a fascinating book to go through if you are interested in making video games yourself or you just want to know more about the industry. This is a wonderful book, and it's one that I just cannot recommend enough. I really, really enjoyed this one when I read it a few years ago. This book is just absolutely spectacular. Once Upon Atari by Howard Scott Warshaw is his story of being in the video game industry, how he got into it, and how he got out of it, and how he eventually found kind of what he enjoys doing most in his life. It's a very, very interesting story, and it shed a lot of light on some of the kind of weird things that were going on at Atari at the time. He also goes really in depth into how he made E.T. the Extraterrestrial, as well as the other games that he made at Atari, and then some of the projects that he was working on after E.T. He got kind of a bad rap until he started getting his story out. But there was so much going on with E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and just so much crap that he had to deal with while he was putting that whole thing together. I didn't know that he was negotiating a new contract at Atari at the same time that he was working on the game, and I didn't know a lot of the other stuff that was going on. I wasn't aware that he was planning on leaving, or was in the process of leaving Atari to go work at 20th Century Fox, and then kind of got pulled back to do more stuff. He was really a rock star at Atari for a short period of time, but made some very important games for video game history. He really did an awful lot, and his story is absolutely incredible. I really enjoyed reading this one. In Not All Fairy Tales Have Happy Endings, Ken Williams talks about his time at Sierra, from when he founded it with his wife and a few other people, all the way up until he left Sierra. And then he talks about kind of the end of Sierra Online, how it just closed up shop, got absorbed into some other companies, and just disappeared. It's kind of a sad story at the end, because you have these people that were so invested in Sierra Online and kind of got led astray by some of their outside investors, and just kind of they made some business decisions that were very good for the people who had stock in the company, but weren't very good for the company as a whole, as they kind of lost their creative freedom and had to meet more deadlines and that sort of thing. It tells the story of the best parts of the video game industry and some of the really crappy parts of the video game industry, where at the beginning you have a lot of creative freedom, you can make whatever you want, do what you need to do in order to get successful, and then after you become successful, then you kind of get ruined by some of the outside forces as you lose more creative freedom on your project. It's a very interesting story, and it's a really great story about a company that had a huge impact on PC games. It's just a wonderful book, and I'm really glad that Ken shared his side of the story, so we have it all in one place instead of kind of scattered throughout interviews that he's done over the years. Out of all of these books that I've talked about, Sid Meier's memoir was the one that brought up the most memories of playing video games to me. Sid talks an awful lot about what he did in the video game industry, how he's kind of a pack rat, how he always kept different game ideas and sort of prototypes and that sort of thing, just in case he would need to come back to them at some point. He made a lot of games that I didn't even realize were made by Microprose and made by Sid Meier's. It's just very fascinating to read all of this stuff and to find this whole story that he had, talk about the business decisions that he wasn't really involved in but kind of happened around him, and just how the company sort of morphed and changed over the years, and how he eventually left, formed a new company in Fire Access, and started doing a lot of the same stuff that he did before, and just keeps kind of trying to push the envelope with different types of games. He's huge in the simulation game series, in the simulation games genre, especially when it comes to Civilization. I thought that was probably the best game that he has ever made, was the Civilization and Civilization series. And that's really how I know about Sid Meier, is from Civilization. It was the only game that I can remember that actually had somebody's name written right into the title. It was really cool to read that, and he has just a fascinating story, not just about his time in video games, but just his life in general is very, very fascinating. And I'm really glad that he shared it in this book. It is just a wonderful read, and this is the one that I would recommend above all of the others. So my final thoughts on these. I kind of jockeyed around this list a little bit and made some revisions to it, especially from the initial one that I wrote on my website to now. And the list will probably get updated again as more and more people from the 80s and 90s are writing their biographies about video games. Eventually this might turn into a top 10 at some point, but for right now I'm just limiting it to 5 because I don't want to throw every book on this list. It's kind of hard to say that everything is my favorite when some of these are, at least in my opinion, are better than others. I am looking forward to reading more from, because some of these books, it sounds like there's more story to some of these. Almost like these were the first part in what could be a series, especially with Warren Davis, where I think he's got a lot more stories to tell. I think Ken Williams probably does. and Sid Meier's probably does as well. But I'm looking forward to reading the next books that are coming out, especially the next autobiographies from certain people that I really enjoyed their games back in the 90s. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.